Welcome back. You're watching Today, and the world is remembering Pope Francis as a man who changed the papacy forever.
A great moderniser and reformer, the Pontiff passing away at the age of 88 last night. And to reflect on the life and the legacy and what happens next, we're joined now by Edward Penton, Senior Vatican Correspondent, live from London. Edward, really appreciate your time. The legacy of Pope Francis, what has he left?
He's left behind a church, I think, which is seems to be much more open, at least to the perception of the public, to everybody. Really, I think he really had a mission. He felt he had a mission to convey the love of God to everybody, which of course is the church's mission. But he did that by trying to break down barriers and trying to show that everybody is welcome in the church. But at the same time, he left a mixed legacy within the church. I think there was still, he exacerbated quite a few divisions within the church. But on the other hand, outside the church, he was seen very much as a great evangelizer.
Well, outside the church, we can see just how revered he was, really. We saw him yesterday address thousands on Easter Sunday, just hours before his death, which I think is why everyone has been so shocked by it today. Obviously, he was unwell. But to see him and then for him to pass just hours later, what do we know about those final moments?
Yes, we got a death certificate earlier today about how he died. He had a stroke, I believe, and then a heart attack, and so he was already failing quite considerably since he was hospitalised in February and March, and we were hoping that he was sort of recovering quite well, but obviously he declined quite considerably. And overnight, he obviously took a very big turn for the worse. But he's actually been suffering quite a lot for a few years. Since he had a major operation in 2021, his health has been declining. So, yes, it wasn't a great surprise.
With those ongoing health issues, you'd imagine the Vatican were well prepared for this moment and what happens from here on?
Yes, they are. I think there's been a lot of time for them to prepare. And of course, now the cardinals will come to Rome. I think there'll be meetings beginning tomorrow morning about how the funeral will take place, and then there'll be the beginning of formal meetings with cardinals next Monday, and then probably the funeral will be on Saturday before then.
And that is expected to be a much simpler style of a funeral. I mean, we know Pope Francis differed greatly from his predecessor, Pope Benedict, as well, in their ideology, but this is going to be different again in terms of how he is sent off.
Yes, it will. He wants a much less ornate funeral. The coffin is going to be made, I think, only of zinc rather than three sources of it. It's usually the case in papal coffins, but the funeral also is going to be simpler, I believe, and he'll also be buried in a place usually not usual for popes, in the Basilica of St Mary Major. He had a great devotion to Our Lady, to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and that basilica is dedicated to her. So he wants to be buried there. There are some popes there, but most of them are buried in St Peter's Basilica.
And just to end on, Edward, how do you think, I mean, obviously there'll be so many mourners there who will turn up for his funeral. There are already thousands there in Rome this year anyway. We know that it's going to be a very popular year with the Jubilee. What do you think for those mourners, those Catholics around the world? How will they be feeling today?
Yes, well, very sad. The death of a pope is always a sad moment for the church, but they'll be blessed to be there to mourn in Rome while he's there lying in state. He will be in state, so they'll be able to go to visit him exposed in the coffin in St Peter's Basilica, and so that'll give them a chance to mourn. There are usually 9 official days of mourning called the Novendiales, and so those will give a good chance for the faithful to mourn him. And to pray for his soul and to pray for the next Pope and for the future of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, he certainly left a legacy, didn't he, Edward? Thank you so much for joining us from London this morning. Good morning and welcome to this special edition of Today. Thank you for your company this Tuesday as the world mourns Pope Francis. The Pontiff passing away at the age of 88, and in the past few moments, the Vatican confirming he died from stroke and heart failure.
As we go to air, this is a live look at St Peter's Square as thousands make the pilgrimage to pay tribute to the Holy Father, the world's 1.4 billion Catholics, remembering Francis as a groundbreaking leader who defended the marginalised and modernised the Church.
We have team coverage standing by in Rome and around the globe for you this morning. Let's begin with Nine's Europe correspondent Jessica Millwood, who starts our coverage today.
He was a Pope of the people until his very last day. Just hours before his death, the Holy Father greeted the faithful on Easter Sunday.
Buona Pasqua.
Dear brothers and sisters, happy Easter.
From the Pope-mobile, a final blessing and a farewell in St. Peter's Square. 24 hours later, his reign is over and the masses mourn.
It is a shock to have it happen so suddenly because he had his last public appearance yesterday.
I think he was wonderful. His simplicity, his kindness, his care of people.
From the Vatican to Australia.
The first Pope from the Southern Hemisphere was close to the people of Australia. For Australian Catholics, he was a devoted champion and loving father.
He lived frugally and simply. Above all else, he was driven by Christ's values of mercy and forgiveness.
Francis was a trailblazer, the first Pope born out of Europe in 12 centuries and the first Jesuit to hold the role, elected in 2013.
Buonasera.
He was a divine disruptor, a reformer who defied tradition and tried to modernise an ancient church.
He was, of course, a Pope of the Southern Hemisphere. I always found him very easy to talk to, very informal, rather like an Australian in that respect.
His health had been on the decline, hospitalised with double pneumonia earlier this year. He would never recover. But the Pope kept working until his last days, meeting world leaders including the King and the US Vice President.
So good to see you.
This morning, the world is in shock and the Catholic Church is forever changed.
All right, let's go live now to Nine's Europe correspondent Jessica Millwood, who is in Rome for us this morning. Jess, the Vatican has just revealed the Pontiff's funeral wishes.
Good morning to you guys on this very significant day. That's right, we are getting more details from the Vatican here this evening. They have revealed the full testament of Pope Francis, and in it he is asked to be buried in the ground in a simple tomb. They've revealed the final burial wishes of Pope Francis. It's a lengthy statement that we've just received into the newsroom. They've also said that the tomb should be in the ground, simple, without particular ornamentation, and that the Pope has arranged for an unnamed benefactor to cover the costs of his burial. This was released just after the official cause of death for Pope Francis was also revealed by the Vatican. They said that he suffered a stroke that put him into a coma that led to catastrophic heart failure. He had a heart attack. We know that he passed officially at around 7:30 this morning, just a few hours after we saw those extraordinary images in St. Peter's Square. Hard to believe that 24 hours ago I was chatting to you on the Today Show talking about those wonderful images with Pope Francis in the back of the Pope-mobile, saying hello to everyone who had gathered here on the holy day, Easter Sunday. He was blessing babies, he was blessing children, and then he was wheeled out onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica just behind me here to give an Easter message. It would be his very final message. We know that he has been unwell, suffering double pneumonia. He was in hospital for 5 weeks, and when he was released from Rome's Gemelli Hospital, he was under strict instructions from his doctors to take it easy over the past 2 months. But what we've heard today is that there was a respectful battle of the wills between the Pontiff and his doctors. He wanted to be out amongst the people. He did not want to be resting, especially because this is a Jubilee year, and he was quite busy throughout that holy week of Easter, especially yesterday when we saw those beautiful images. So he was working right until the very end. Where to from here? Well, we understand that the Pope's body will be moved to the Basilica and lie in state potentially on Wednesday, but that will be confirmed after a meeting of the Cardinals tomorrow. There is now 9 days of mourning. The Pope's funeral will take place somewhere between day 4 and day 6. And then, of course, the conclave far down the line right now will be between day 15 and day 20. But right now, of course, it is all about Pope Francis, the extraordinary man that he was, showing that he really was the people's Pope right until the very end.
Yeah, quite the process to go through, and you can still see all those people streaming through St Basilica Square as well. Thank you so much, Jess.
Well, let's go to today's Jack Hahn, who's at St Mary's Cathedral in Sydney. Morning to you, Jack. Catholics here at home all coming together today.
Yeah, that's exactly what will be happening, James and Sarah. Good morning to you both. There's more than 5 million Catholics here in Australia this morning, all coming to terms with this news. Many expected to come together for Mass sometime soon. So far, 2 capital cities have locked in special services for today here in Sydney. There'll be 3 at St Mary's Cathedral in the city. The first one at 6:45 this morning, followed by one just after 1 o'clock and another at 5:30 this afternoon, while in Perth at St Mary's Cathedral on St George's Terrace, there'll be a service at 12:10. Nothing set in stone yet for St Patrick's Cathedral in Melbourne, although the doors there will open at 7 a.m. this morning for people to have a quiet moment of reflection. We've been hearing reaction coming in from all sides of society, including from our politicians and from leaders. I want to bring up this statement from the Governor-General of Australia, Sam Mostyn. She says that she extends her respect and remembrance to the Catholic community in Australia and around the world as millions of Australian Catholics mourn a spiritual guide, father and friend. We can reflect on His Holiness and His message of peace. And that is exactly what will be happening this morning, with all flags right around the country being flown at half-mast. James?
Jack, thank you.
Well, King Charles says he and Queen Camilla have heavy hearts after Pope Francis's death. In a statement, the monarch said although they are deeply saddened by the pontiff's passing, they were relieved he was able to share an Easter greeting with the Church. Adding, the Pope will be remembered for his compassion, his concern for the unity of the Church, and for his tireless commitment to the common causes of all people of faith and to those of goodwill who work for the benefit of others. Charles went on to say, the Queen and I remember with particular affection our meetings with His Holiness over the years, and we were greatly moved to have been able to visit him earlier this month.
Well, now to US correspondent Jonathan Kersley, who's at St Charles Borromeo Catholic Church in Los Angeles. Hello, Jono. Leaders around the world mourning Pope Francis.
They are. There's 1.4 billion Catholics estimated around the world, and world leaders really are gathering to mourn on behalf of them the passing of Pope Francis. US President Donald Trump speaking from the White House earlier today in tribute. He was a man who did not have the greatest of relationships with Pope Francis. The pair met back in 2017 when Donald Trump travelled to Vatican City. And if a picture could paint 1,000 words, well, then maybe one still says it all. Pope Francis had criticised Donald Trump's plans for a border wall under his first administration. As recently as February, he'd criticised his renewed immigration plans. But speaking earlier today at the White House, this is what the US Commander-in-Chief had to say.
He was a good man, worked hard, he loved the world.
Vice President J.D. Vance was the last world leader to meet with the pontiff, that taking place on Easter Sunday, just a matter of hours before his passing. The Vice President taking to social media overnight to say, my heart goes out to the millions of Christians all over the world who loved him. There's been tribute too from Barack Obama, the former US President, who says, in his humility and his gestures, at once simple and profound, he shook us out of our complacency and reminded us that we are all bound by moral obligations to God and one another. Pope Francis often prayed for peace right around the world, none more so than in Ukraine, where war has raged for the past few years. Ukraine's wartime leader Volodymyr Zelensky lending his voice to the tributes, saying he knew how to give hope, ease suffering through prayer and foster unity. He prayed for peace in Ukraine and for Ukrainians. You mentioned the message from King Charles and Camilla. There has been a message too from British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, who says of Pope Francis, he was close to the realities of human fragility, meeting Christians around the world facing war, famine, persecution and poverty, yet he never lost the faith-fueled hope of a better world. And it's the 1.4 billion Catholics around the world now remembering the life of Pope Francis. In his home city of Buenos Aires in Argentina, mourners have gathered at Mass to remember the life of the 88-year-old as they all now prepare to say goodbye to the man who was the 266th leader of the Catholic Church.